have our sponsor here, Channel, and Ben, on the panel is with Channel. It's a multi-channel e-commerce platform. I also want to point out one of the sessions we have coming up on March 5th. That's a Tuesday, I think, in this very room, is a panel on how to get great creative out of your creative partners, whether that's an agency or whether you're running an in-house marketing department. I think everybody on the panel here has experience with this. How do you get great creative? Well, we've got star cast in this one. John Statham used to be the creative director of DDB at Arnold, Greg Collins from BBDO, Beck Schwartz, who ran all creative for Nickelodeon Television, Bradley Warner does content creative for CBRE, will be here to tell you how to do it, and there'll be a skills building workshop there. Turning to our panel, you'd have to be blind not to see the impact that Gen AI and AI is having in our world. In fact, if you saw just a couple of weeks ago, Media Post magazine named OpenAI as their creative agency of the year, and probably a first technology company win. And quite frankly, I think Sam Altman should win Marketer of the Year because nobody has done more to sort of change the way we all think about technology than he has. And while this is changing our lives quite a bit, challenge comes all kinds of opportunities, especially for the young generation of marketers who are going to be entering a field that is rapidly evolving. How do we take advantage of these technologies? What are we doing now? And quite frankly, I actually feel quite confident that if there's any profession that's really going to utilize technology well, it's marketing, because we have always been at the forefront of technology. A lot of media were actually technology companies. Radio comes from RCA, which started NBC, so they'd have content to put on radio. Television was a really interesting technology, right, that media really controls. And in just sort of our careers, the internet changed everything, and social media, and mobile, and now this is just the latest. So to help us unpack this, we've got a really great panel. And I guess starting from my side down, we have Tom Cuniff, who I've been lucky enough to work with on occasion, founder of Cuniff Consulting, strategic B2B marketing and brand marketing consultancy, specializing in tech and supply chain and other services. Some of your clients include SAP and Samsung and iHeart. To him is Alice Lin, who I also was quite lucky enough to sit across from at the New York Times. Boy, do you have a lot of great things on your resume. He's the Vice President of Direct-to-Consumer Marketing at BBC Studios, leads BBC Studios digital services globally, including SVOD for my students, that's streaming video on demand, podcasts, and BBC.com. And I have to humble brag, you were one of Ad Age's top marketers of the year, and I think you've won 5 Com Gold Lions. So next to you, Nicole Balsam, principal at Heidrick & Struggles, one of the world's leading executive recruitment firms, and she's a member of the consumer markets practice. She specializes in recruiting leadership teams for digitally enabled consumer products and service businesses, which would include a lot of what we're talking about here today. And thank you, Nicole. Really lucky to have your point of view, because we're all interested in what skills do companies need from marketers in the future? What are they asking for now? Next to Nicole is Ben Riggles, the managing director of Channable in North America. 20 years of marketing and technology industry experience. He's helped organizations navigate through dramatically changing landscape of online marketing, e-commerce, and social media. It sounds like exactly what we were just saying, all our lives go through. And at the end, Andrew Rosen is the industry lead for health and wellness at Nextdoor, nextdoor.com, a really fun website. We were all just talking about it before this started. It's a social platform that connects neighbors to neighbors and leverages ML and AI. We'll be talking about some of those acronyms probably to support more civil conversations. I can't think of anything more timely. Thank you, panel. Really great to have you here. And let me just throw one out to Tal. So you probably have up on the panel some of the most direct technology experience, using technology to drive e-commerce sales and direct consumer sales on digital. What has happened in the last 2 years? How is your approach to this change, and what are the people in your department doing to embrace Gen AI and all the new technologies to do what they used to do?
Before I joined BBC Studios, I was at the NBA leading customer acquisition for them globally. So in there, I worked directly with Nike. NBA app was one of my products. League Pass was one of my products. And if you think about e-commerce back in the day, it was very much about the consumer telling the companies what they wanted. But then you think about personalization at scale, dynamic creative optimization, putting the right product in front of the right person at the time of conversion. Like that's what people are interested in, right? So sample from the NBA. NBA are the arbiters of style. Like a lot of people think like you look at them, you see what they're wearing, and you like, I want that look, right? So the NBA built this image recognition functionality within the NBA app to look at the players on the court. And if they're wearing something new, like the latest sneakers, you'll see a Nike banner at the bottom showing you buy this look, right? So tying that transaction to what you're consuming as a fan to kind of bring that whole conversion around.
So what you're describing sounds like fairly well known tactics that digital marketing folks have been using since ad networks were a thing. So Andrew, so hearing what Tal said, like getting the right message in front of the right consumer, sort of at the right moment, how has that changed, right, in the last really 18 months?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because that adage of right product, right ad, right person, right time has sort of been what we've been saying for a really long time. 15, 20 years ago at this point, ad networks, which we could go into at length about it. And that was the promise, the idea that leveraging, at the time, sophisticated targeting technologies like behavioral targeting, contextual targeting, would allow an advertiser to put that ad in front of that person when they're most likely to engage or to make it as relevant as possible. A lot of the language, and I think this is really interesting, is where the history of it becomes so compelling. There's a cycle to all of this, not because nothing changes, but just because we get so much better at the promises we were making 20 years ago. So there's these tiny little inflection points where we have to go back to brand marketers and say, on the sales side, we have this amazing way to do this new thing. And they're like, but you said you've been doing that for the last 5 years. We were like, right, but now we really are. So I think that's where it kind of comes into play is what we've been saying for a long time continues to get more and more possible with the application of these truly transformative technologies. And now in the last 18 months, certainly it's just started to sort of like, it's a virtuous cycle that just goes around and around at this point. It's a lot less spin and a lot more substance.
So I think that's really fascinating because what I'm seeing in my world is a lot of platforms that we use, Salesforce, Marketo, Sprout, are integrating AI into what they do. So I don't have to, right? They're like building these tools. Ben, you're with a technology platform company. How are you guys thinking about AI? Is it becoming a bigger part of like the tool set?
I think it's definitely becoming a bigger part of everybody's tool set. And I think we look at it as, what are you trying to do with AI? And there's things that you can do behind the scenes to make your jobs easier. But a lot of times what we're seeing is how do you use AI to serve the right information to the right people at the right time? So if you guys use Amazon, I'm sure everybody here uses Amazon. They've just launched Rufus, and not all of you will have it. It's a beta test, but now Rufus is your AI assistant for Amazon. And so now as a marketer, instead of being able to control where your products are being placed using traditional media methods, you're going to have to think contextually about the reviews, your descriptions, all the types of things that an AI and machine learning algorithm is going to look to serve your product to somebody at the right time, which kind of gets out of your control from a science perspective.
What you guys are saying reminds me of a quote, which you told me earlier, which I thought was funny, which is that how are you describing AI? And you said something like,
oh, AI is always what computers can't do yet. So the frontier keeps moving. As soon as AI can do it, it doesn't matter anymore.
in a way, is AI, I mean, in a way, it's just an extension of what we've all been doing with algorithms, just the algorithms have become so much more complex, or the learning behind them is much more vast.
Yeah.
But so it becomes invisible. So then what skills, Nicole, do we need if this becomes invisible and it's just another tool? What skills do you think we need to have as professionals? What skills should all the, the students in the audience be learning to make sure they have careers in the future?
Well, I think the best thing is that we don't yet know what AI will be. And so everyone in this room has an opportunity to figure that out because all of us, frankly, are too busy to do it. So we'll look to you all to teach us. But I think most importantly is to develop critical thinking skills, because you can put stuff into AI all day long, but if you can't analyze the information you're getting back and decipher if it's relevant for the question that you asked, then it's actually ultimately useless.
Yeah, I'd love to unpack that more with the panel about how our skills as marketers, as storytellers, as people who draw insights about consumers, ultimately is what sort of fuels the things that AI is helping us do. It's not the other way around. AI isn't providing us with insights.
I think really everybody has to stay really relentlessly curious if you want to stay employed because everything will change. Like when I started my career, my first job was in advertising. I was 17 years old, and part of my job was to file rotogravure plates. Roto is a thing that's ancient even then. So everything just keeps changing, and so you always have to keep learning, and you can't kind of assume anything. But the real opportunity, in my opinion, for anybody who's starting out is that because we don't know what all this is going to be yet, that means the playing field is level in a way that it sort of shouldn't be from our point of view. So you can invent things and you can be part of shaping that future. So if you're not aggressively experimenting with this, I would do that right away. And one piece of advice I would give you is find something that's part of your daily workflow. Find a way to have AI help you do that. And in the process, you'll get good at using the tool because you'll sort of realize that it's saving you hours.
I mean, it's really the Wild West, right? And I think the Wild West can create a lot of problems if you think about where AI can go, right? So I was experimenting with machine learning and natural language processing back in 2015 with email subject lines. I feel like that with all the email service providers, people like Salesforce, you can kind of customize and send out many different emails at once. And you can kind of do a multivariate test to understand what copy drives the best conversion rate. So I was testing out machine learning to create 1,000 different variations of copy to drive a higher conversion rate, which was subscriptions for the New York Times. And I was driving literally millions of dollars incremental revenue through just throwing it into the machine and spitting out all these variations. But the problem was the copywriters that was supposed to write copy were no longer doing that. So then they're like, well, you just replaced me. So then I said, well, I'm making a bunch more money for the company. And then they create this whole dialogue. Even with the publisher, because then it came down to, well, we're the New York Times, we have standard with copy. Yes, you've made millions of dollars. If you dial it back just a little bit until we're comfortable with the copy and engage the copywriters to be comfortable with the copy that you're creating and not just having it wild out there, then you're making a sacrifice of revenue, but that's okay. Because we as professionals understand the trade-off. You can't just let it go full bore because you don't know what's going to happen.
Adding to the creativity part of that, what you can do with machines versus what humans could do at iHeart. When I was there, it was the division that became Live Nation. So we were doing concerts. And we had really abysmal newsletter subscription. And we were using all these variations of like, sign up now, sign up, try this, try that. And the thing that pushed us over the edge was changing not the opt-in, but the opt-out to say, that's okay, I like missing concerts. And that line changed everything, but it wasn't something I think that, AI would have necessarily come up with, right? It was that sort of human understanding of behavior that made the difference. I know, Andrew, you use it a lot in that sort of like subtle way of like, how are you creating civility, right, amongst people?
So yeah, there's the aspect of leveraging generative AI. So what we do at Nextdoor, and one of the things that we launched 2, 3, almost 4 years ago now, is something called the kindness reminder. Kindness reminder uses ML to understand if what you're about to post is genuinely mean. And it'll say, and there's a lot of science behind taking a beat, taking time, adding friction, to say like, this is pretty awful, are you sure you want to write? And what we find is that about 30% of the time, people will decide that, no, I don't really want to say that to that person. I can take a beat and say something nicer. Now we're using generative AI to suggest copy that people tend to just use. So that's how we're kind of using it to create those guardrails to help people have better conversations. The other thing I was thinking though, in terms of how to use these tools, how to experiment, is look for the sharp edges quickly. Like I was using Dolly and I asked it for a reason, for like a really cool thing at work. And I asked it for a salesperson in the front seat driving and an account manager in the back seat. And what I got was like 2 really weirdly slick white people sitting side by side in a futuristic car. And that's problematic in a number of ways. And so understanding what those limitations are and then developing practices for how to create better outcomes. I mean, there's so much opportunity there because it is really cool and amazingly utile, but it's nascent. There's so much that needs to be done. And that's where I think all the experimentation that the people in this room are going to be doing is really going to advance things that will help create better copy, better content, better creative, better outcomes.
I'm thinking of what you said, I don't know who you were quoting, that said like AI is like the world's biggest pool of interns.
But Andreessen Horowitz, they're the investment firm. But somebody there wrote that it's not like infinite cognition, it's not infinite thinking, it's infinite interns. And the interns are kind of, they don't have a lot of experience, they don't have a lot of context, but they'll work really hard. So you have to sort of give them more coaching than you might want to at first. But once you get it to understand what you want, it'll work really, really hard. I think that's a great way to look at it. But it does mean that a lot of the work that I grew up doing will just vanish. The sort of intern work. And so I think it's going to be really, really hard for anybody to get in and get traction, which is another reason I'll keep coming back to being curious. You have to be curious and find your edge and realize that because the way the playing field is, use this moment to bend it to your advantage. So go figure out what people are too old to figure out and go do that and be really good at it.
Nicole, have you I'm curious too, have you heard of AI having an effect on employment in one way or another? There's certain kind of jobs that you see like those seem to be, I'm seeing less and less of that, but I'm seeing more of something else, and I think it's being driven by this technology.
I mean, yes, I think as you were alluding to, like a lot of the entry level, unfortunately, is gonna disappear. I think that what will differentiate an entry level candidate is the ability to be creative, maybe utilizing the AI as a jumping off point to spur your creativity, but not submitting that as your answer, because that's not what will move the ball forward on any given project. In terms of future state, I think just more broadly on AI, what we've been seeing more is people actually thinking through like a chief ethics officer, someone who actually thinks about sort of the greater good and the mission and how does AI play into that for a business. But yeah, we're definitely still at the beginning of what is possible.
Thinking through some of the tools, right, that we're using today, and everybody here I'm sure is familiar with ChatGPT, but there's a lot of them. There's a lot of different tools. And I have, by the way, at the end, I have a handout with a lot of different tools that are free or, free trials at least, that you can all take home and start to experiment with. But when it comes to being curious and experimenting, are there certain things you're telling your teams to practice with or playing with yourselves that you think are worth looking at?
I want to come back to what Tom was saying about the intern thing, because I think that's really interesting, tied to like the technology and what tools you're using as well. Because I do a lot of lifetime value modeling for what I do, like how much is a customer worth over a period of time, right? It's a pretty simple calculation. And I used ChatGPT as a shortcut. I gave it its retention curve, cost per, the item, all the things I needed to put. It was wildly wrong lifetime value. So if I didn't understand what it should or range it would be, I would have taken it as face value and like, oh, here's lifetime value of something. It's something like an intern would do. They wouldn't have the experience to understand what a true lifetime value should be, and they just export it out. So I think that is the tool for creating that output, but then you have to use your mind to understand, is this right or not? So you always have to fact check it. So we're using a lot of like ChatGPT because of it is that shortcut, but you always have to edit it, right? So I may be thinking about different copy for a PowerPoint. I'm just noodling on this thing, like what's a way to say something? And then ChatGPT, give me some examples, and it helps spur creative thought. And because you're in a professional setting, you don't have to worry about plagiarism all that much. But you have to change it, right? Because it's not always right.
I don't know if you do this too, but I give it a role. Like I'll say, you're a world-class executive search consultant. You need to put together a 2025 business plan or else you're going to get fired. And it will act as that, and then you can refine it further. But I find that when you give it a personality to play, it will come back with better content.
I do think though there's a risk, and we're not there yet. When AI gets to the point where it's right about more than 85% of the time, we'll start to routinely have lots of bad answers. We'll still have 15% really bad answers because you'll get used to, you'll be in a hurry, you'll dish it to ChatGPT or whatever that is. It'll come back with an answer and you say, fine, moving on. Close enough, and you'll be wrong a lot. So there is some role. I don't know exactly what happened in your calculation, but there's something in your pattern recognition from having done this where you go, that can't possibly be right. If you don't have that early on, you won't know. It'll look right to you and it will seem right most of the time. So I think that's another really big risk is like, how much do you trust this intern? And knowing that it's naive, it doesn't have a theory of mind. It doesn't know what it is. It doesn't know what it's doing. It's just, they call it a stochastic parrot. It just says, usually after Mary had a little, it's like limb, and that's it. And the next part of them, then the doctor was surprised.
Just to add, and to Nicole's point earlier, I think it's what we're kind of saying is that critical thinking and creativity can't be recreated in AI. And so no matter what the initial output is, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, it's what you bring to it that's going to make it great or sort of or wildly inaccurate, where you kill your problem.
I know like an e-commerce example from my experience. So West Elm, all the transactions that happen on the site or in the store are recorded, sent immediately. So the marketing team used to get every hour on the hour, I can see the sales for that day. And if by 11 o'clock, the sales weren't looking like they were going to land where we wanted to be, for the panic begins. The email comes from the CFO, says like, we're 4% behind today. What are you going to do? Right. So we deployed tools, mostly algorithmic, not quite yet AI, but sophisticated algorithms to say like, okay, what parts of the country are weak and what categories, and then could you adjust the pricing? We can optimize the heck out of it, but the results of that were relatively small versus when a merchandiser who had years of experience in understanding consumers would just say like, put a picture of blue sheets on the front page instead of the stripe sheets, and then sales would like rocket. And it was that kind of again, like I don't know that we're at a state, or we'll get to a state where technology will have that level of insight or experience that comes with just doing a job for a long time and understanding what looks right and what moves the needle, what happens in a store.
But if an AI is trained with enough of those people who are being unemployed by the AI, they can really get there pretty quickly. I think that's, one of the weird challenges is that human assisted AI will still be a thing for a long time. But it will start to master that.
Then I'm curious again, like on the platform side. So you have all these inputs from, oh God, I don't know how many different platforms you plug into for people who are doing e-commerce. Have you seen examples of where like the technology has like unveiled or revealed a path forward for a marketer that they perhaps didn't see on their own?
Well, I think, number one, we've definitely seen what not to do, because we've seen the ChatGPT, people use that to try to post to Amazon and other places at scale, and it'll come out and say, hey, I'm an OpenAI model, and that's the title on Amazon. And so, there's a lot of these errors happening as well, so it definitely needs to be controlled. It's really about the creativity part of it, and so it's taking a lot of the workload off of people, automating some of the behind the scenes things so that you can then be more creative around, how you're going to go to market. And I think what we've seen is that, the AI needs to be, given a direction similar to your prompt, and evidently they work harder if you're meaner to them. But we've seen a lot of that. And, I was, one of the things I think we talked about on the panel was that if you guys have heard, has anybody heard of the Vesuvius Prize that was recently done? So near Pompeii, Vesuvius, when it exploded, it also hit a town called Herculaneum, and all of these scrolls were carbonized there. And so for literally 400 years, they've been trying to tear apart these scrolls manually and try to get peer underneath them. And it wasn't until a student looked at an X-ray of it and noticed some specific differentiation on the X-ray that he trained an AI model on it and was able to solve it basically at a party virtual desktop as a college student, right? And people have tried this for 20 years, and it's kind of the same thing in marketing, where if you don't look at it with a different perspective, you're just going to get the same result over and over again from the AI. And that's where I think if I were you guys, I'd be super excited about bringing a new perspective in compared to maybe how some of us might look at it.
I mean, it's pretty amazing. So what I'm hearing, Fausto, about how important sort of the human element is in a lot of this and the kinds of things that are being replaced by computers. I feel it's almost like it's revenge of the English majors. That the thing that is being replaced is like very sort of like mechanized, sort of math-based functions. And then the area that the computer has yet not to be able to fully take over or replace is creativity, intuition. What do you guys say to that?
You're optimistic. I think it will get better at those things. I also think there's a term called AI centaur, which is sort of like half human, half computer. And routinely in chess, an AI plus a grandmaster will beat any AI or any grandmaster alone. So when you put them together, so I think there still remains a role for that, but I think the future is really going to be about, you have to keep climbing up this learning curve and keep getting to where AI can't quite catch you yet. And on that subject, I think one of the main ones is human interaction. Understanding people and how to get things done will be the skill that these AIs will still have the hardest time with, because people are irrational. People are hungover. People broke up with their girlfriend or boyfriend. So that's where I keep looking to it. You know, I think there's a lot of the creativity stuff. If we're honest, you know, I grew up in advertising as a creative director. And how hard is it to say umbrellas are 20% off? How hard is it to say that raincoats are in all the latest fashion colors from Florence? A lot of that stuff is really pretty easy to knock off. Even a lot of the stuff, you can probably sit down based on the Super Bowl and write a reasonably good Super Bowl ad. You know what a celebrity is, you know how they're used, you know how the humor is. In a way, even though it's where I grew up, I don't think it's that hard.
All right, well, speaking of the Super Bowl, last night, I think I saw twice an ad where the woman is on the phone with a customer service rep, right? And goes back and forth like, wait, you're a human? How do I know you're a human? The bots are getting really, really great. In fact, we just did a voiceover using AI on a video. You can't tell. They programmed in ums and ahs and like slight stutters, and it's fabulous. It's great. But all right, so is there like impending AI backlash? Is that ad saying like people are already a little scared and are pushing back against AI?
I mean, I think so, personally. I think that in the future, there will be a premium on human made. Like, I believe that people will want to know that something was created authentically by another human being. I don't know. In my business, we always think about how when you're at the top 10% of any industry, machines can't duplicate it, because as others were alluding to, that human to human interaction is something that cannot be replaced, or we're not close to having it be replaced. So I think it's a matter of like, how do you level up in whatever field you're interested in to become that top 10% that machines can't do what you do.
There's I'll go to BBC. There was actually a Doctor Who episode in which there was like an Amazon-like company that proudly advertised they were 2% organic run in the future. Like it was all machines, and it was almost like what do you call it? Like an M Corp or whatever, like a woman-owned business. They were like 2% of our employees are not synthetic. That was their bragging. So maybe we'll be there one day, but.
It was kind of like a made in the USA, right? That means something versus an unnamed factory. But you're saying something that was interesting because we talk about the creativity and strategy behind things, and I'm thinking about so there's a company, WSC Sports. The way that it works is that at least this is my experience when they're plugged into the NBA, and they still are. All the NBA games have fiber optic cables that go to Secaucus, New Jersey, where they have this AI system that listens for audio levels in the game and automatically creates clips of the games based on what excitement happened, and then who did the dunk, what happened, and automatically resizes that for different social media platforms and posts it automatically. And then what it helped for me was that what you would often see is tune in the last 5 minutes of the game when the action's heating up, it's close. That drives tune in, it drives league pass subscriptions, drives revenue up, right? Tune in goes up. So it automatically creates clips of like, well, close game, 5 minutes left in the game, and automatically post. And back in the day, it would take a user or somebody like me to brief something in, and you can't create it that fast. But you still need a person to kind of create that idea, I want to do this thing. And then you're leaning on the tools to really create billions of clips that post automatic. But a person had to figure out, I want to do this thing. So I think that using your creativity that way is super helpful. And it's letting it's like an intern.
Right.
Just clipping, right? Clipping things. You don't need somebody to do that anymore.
I think you can Black Mirror that to prove the point, which is if in 15 years, 5 years, 2 years, you could have a complete AI generated basketball game that you can't watch in real life, obviously, but you could watch, and it's lifelike and it's perfect and it's unpredictable and it's complete AI. Is there still a premium to go and watch people play basketball? And the answer is going to be yes. Like that's not about live sports versus TV. It's about humanity and what we need and what we want. This isn't my thing, but Scott Galloway keeps talking about one of the problems with the vision is that we are not built biologically to want our peripheral vision to be cut off, which is part of the reason why VR headsets cause such nausea and why we get uncomfortable after a little bit. So it's like there are biological mechanisms and needs that need to be satisfied, both sort of physical and emotional, that I do think will prevent us from going full on uncanny valley with it. For now, until we get used to it.
Don't get me started on VR headsets. They're inherently misogynistic. They were built by men for men without the understanding that more than 50% of women experience nausea while wearing VR. So it's inherently not made for women.
What is it about women that makes it hard for them to deal with?
Your center of gravity.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I want to talk about equity in clinical trial, but we're not going to.
Right, well, and speaking of AI, I mean, we're kind of getting up to the marketing, but one of the big sort of challenges in AI, we have an AI ethics group at Wipro, is that a lot of the models were trained on men, right? So this is a true story. For a while, Amazon was using in their HR department an AI screening tool to help alert, because they get so many resumes, like how do we determine who is most likely to be successful here? They created a AI thing that they trained on their most successful employees who are, their most senior people are male. So it learned very quickly to reject female resumes because they certainly don't look like successful people here. And they had to after a while, they figured it out, turned it off or whatever. But I think we're going to see a lot of this bias in data. Clinical trials is a real thing, a real danger. So, but now I'm curious now in marketing, is that a challenge we have in DTC and e-commerce? If I'm just looking at sort of browsing behaviors, is it more sort of clinical? Am I devoid of those kinds of biases?
I think bias is in everything. I don't know how you can avoid that. Even if you have a recommendation engine, right? So it's going to recommend this product versus that product. It doesn't have the sense to say there might be something that's outside that people would like much more. It only can deal with the data it has. And so it says, okay, this one's very popular and it'll work. But in a way, if you're not careful, it will tend to suppress innovation because there'll be a sameness. So it can keep reducing down, which will be the role for creative people if they're allowed to do it. But I think one of the challenges in marketing is what happens when AI is good enough where it's 80% as good as a CMO and it costs 10% of a CMO. Then the CFO says, that ain't bad. I think I'll get one of those.
I mean, I feel like in certain businesses, that's fine.
Yeah.
And maybe you would agree, because I'm sure you see like a major variety of sizes and kinds, top quality work. I still think you need a human being driving.
Yeah, because isn't what you were saying, Nicole, at the beginning, like so much of what happens at a senior level and really throughout all levels of an organization is human to human contact. I once saw a previous boss fire somebody. I was in the office while she fired somebody. She was brilliant. She fired this person and they left thanking her. I thought, wow, she's got that ninja skill of empathy and everything. And you can't, that's a person skill, right? Like reading somebody's mind, looking at their face and knowing how to talk to them in a way that, so again, we're thinking e-commerce, but I wonder too how e-commerce is possibly really different than other kinds of commerce where you're one-on-one with somebody in a store making a sale. Like again, like computers are great at scale, but not really good at.
I'm gonna posit something that might be demonstrably untrue. Brands have purpose and mission and a North Star. And so you could look at it as whatever tech you're using, whatever processes you're adapting, whatever, headcount you're cutting. If you're forming your product, your value, your relationship with your customers against that North Star, you'll be okay. So I make a lot of fun of, I made some fun of Nextdoor, which is my company. Please don't tell anyone I did that. But our purpose is to cultivate a kinder world where everyone has a neighbor they rely on. There are sharp edges there are challenges there, but that's what we're trying to do. When we think about the use of technology, it's against that aim. And our business model sort of weaves into that. So I wonder if that's part of it, is that like purpose and mission and living up to that. And that dictates how, whether, how it weaves into e-com.
I think you're right.
Okay,
I
great.
think anyone could set up an AI tool, open up a, little Shopify store or something and just buy some ads on Instagram and probably make a decent amount of money if they are good at using the tools and letting AI kind of guide them. But you're not going to break through. You're not going to create a business that matters or
That lasts.
have a purpose beyond targeting your target, selling them crap.
I think there are challenges going to occur fairly soon because New York Times has to do OpenAI. A lot of media companies are blocking their websites from OpenAI, scraping it. And we're talking about the data you have is the most important thing that you have. When I was at the Times, this is actually a true example. I have a friend that only visited the Times one time because it was an obituary. And then they went a second time and all the articles were obituaries because that's what all the data had because they didn't have anything else. So you think about where news organizations are blocking the data. You've seen the deprecation of cookies. You're starting to have less information about users and less sources to pull information from. So then are we going to have less accurate information, less accurate predictions? I think we are.
And this is the first party data,
Yeah.
part of the program, because really where e-commerce is going to be, I think where e-commerce has a big future is going to be in the first party data holders like Amazon, who knows everything I've ever bought, listens to my conversations in the kitchen through Alexa, knows my television tastes through Amazon Prime Video, who's better equipped to use large language models to understand and make recommendations to me.
Yeah, I was talking to Peter earlier and I said it'd be really interesting for Amazon to buy, something you may not know is Procter & Gamble owns all the best patents for detergents. That's why they're actually win at that game. They own all of them. In theory, Amazon could buy them with the change in the Jeff Bezos' couch, buy all those patents, and now what does it have? It's perfectly integrated. It has a cheap video, it has Amazon Prime, it has all the purchase data, it has everything. It's already shipping to your house every day anyway. So in theory, they could just take over the soap business like that, which may not sound terribly glamorous, but there's an awful lot of money. And so
Yeah, data, toothpaste, and I guess medicine is going to be where they're probably going to go next, over the counter.
yeah, they're looking hard at all that. And so then, in that same dystopian view of the world, then how do you possibly compete with Amazon? Because they've got all of this lined up. Probably at the FTC would eventually split them off, but they would still be this behemoth. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
If you look at Meta now, I mean, it's, what Meta did over the past year after Apple's iOS changes and made tracking impossible. Just fed their LLM, fed their AI models, and now their targeting and optimization is more effective than what they could do before that happened. And their stock price is up, 4x in the last year. So it's happening. Like, there's less data, but if you have a lot of that first party data, now with the power of AI, you can predict what people want, need, and will buy, make those decisions a lot more effectively. And then it creates a real time that everyone else, again, has to be like, I don't know, we do stuff too.
Yeah. Newsletter sign up to the gateway to first party data, right?
Yeah.
Sign up, give your email, and suddenly know everything about you connected to it.
Yeah.
So we use on Prime Video, there's a tool called Creative Optimizer, which is their new AI optimization tool. And we just give it literally all the shows that we have at BBC. And instead of us saying, put this show to this audience targeting, it just figures it out, the black box model. and it lowered our cost per acquisition 40%.
It's crazy.
And like, I don't know how it works, AI, and now we're making so much more money on it.
It's
Wow.
the
Right.
cyclical thing. It's the ad networks used to be, don't worry about it, we'll make it work. Don't ask questions. And then we went on this slow,
Well, you have
Mark
questions all the time, they can't tell you anything,
They won't.
they won't tell you.
but the transparency, accountability, control became more and more important, which kicked off the programmatic side of it. So you wonder if like eventually it'll come back around to the point where you can't keep this control. We need some of it somehow.
But in a way, you know, what you can do if you have enough scale, like Tesla, for example, tests all the AI in their cars. They take little sandboxes. And 1% of the population will get that. And they have enough data for that to be statistically significant. But you can do that at scale with Amazon, right? So it doesn't even have to know what the answer is. It just has to be able to test it at scale and come back with an answer. So that's part of the reason why I'm not so bullish on humanity, our ability to predict things and our pattern recognition, because a lot of that can be automated. So the real question is, you know, then how do you stay ahead of that?
So I want to open it up to our guests here in the room and those who are joining us online to ask the panel any questions.
So Ben, I have a question for you. There's a lot of DTC e-commerce marketers out there. If I'm trying to acquire customers through Instagram or one of the walled gardens, their prices are fairly high. My customer acquisition cost is fairly high. If I'm on Shopify, what you know, I'm seeing, you know, all kinds of, you know, massagers in my Instagram feed on a daily basis. There's all kinds of affiliate programs. What are the AI tools that you think are the best? If I'm a DTC e-marketer or e-commerce marketer right now, what are the things that are going to give me an edge?
I think there's a couple ways to look at it. There's can you do your creative on your own, which is looking at some AI tools, Canvas and others that do creative for you. I think where a lot of people are
That's a relatively small part of my customer acquisition cost.
right. Yeah, and a lot of where we're seeing people have success is, you know, we're moving into the era of social commerce now, where that's why TikTok Shops is kicking off and everything else. And so being able to find those influencers, and you can use AI and machine learning now to understand, you know, who are the influencers that target my audience. And it's not about going to find, you know, the most expensive influencer. It's about finding influencers that can move your niche and get your product in front of them and do it through video. You know, a lot of these influencers now will do a video shopping. I got a text today from Knockaround Sunglasses of all places because I bought $25 sunglasses, and they want me to go watch their video of her talking about the sunglasses, right? And so that's kind of where we're moving into. And so being able to use AI to identify where you should put that, what products should be out there, and then making sure you're aligning it to your audiences.
I'm glad you mentioned TikTok Shops because I think that's really interesting. It's sort of a recent development, actually, but one of the students was using it. They seem to be really good at developing algorithms, right? That have an air of not randomness, but serendipity, I guess, you know, to when you're scrolling. It isn't like Instagram, which gets you into a little box and it just gets like narrower and narrower until you're just looking at the same thing. I'm curious, like what's your experience in seeing how DTC marketers are taking advantage of what TikTok is doing? You know, there are other platforms that have similarly wild approaches to using AI, you know, much more open, much more fanciful.
I think TikTok's just putting a lot of time, money, and effort into it. I've sat in their offices in London and watched all the people come that they're bringing in. They bring the influencers in. They have a whole, you know, they've got a data analytics team. They're training their own models, and they're trying to build out basically just a closed ecosystem of shops so that they can compete with Amazon and others here. We've seen eBay. If you guys go on eBay now, they've launched a live influencer type environment where they're seeing really astronomical success on people going and talking about Pokemon cards or trading cards, and then they're selling them off their live feeds as well. So I think that's a less of an AI type driven approach and more of kind of embracing social commerce. But for TikTok Shops, you know, they obviously have the scale to do that. And you saw Instagram and Meta actually try to do it and fail as well. And so it's not just something that you can just plug in and make work.
And these social commerce platforms are basically open to all other e-commerce sellers, right?
Right.
For the most part.
Yeah, for the most part.
Probably not Amazon.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Amazon is now kind of, you know, Amazon and Facebook and Meta, announced a partnership so that you can now check out using your Amazon account through through Facebook or Instagram. And so there is kind of a closed loop where they recognize that their TikTok Shops is trying to be the commerce platform, And whereas Facebook and Meta seem to be content to be the advertising platform right now. So there's just different ways you can approach.
Being the checkout platform seems really interesting.
Yeah, I think for TikTok, it's a closed ecosystem, so they want to, but then you've got to think about fulfillment, distribution, and all the other stuff that Amazon's like that.
So my question is, how do you feel how AI, including GPT, shaped the way of how you manage the team? Because I remember it said by Nico or Sam that there's actually no like entry-level technicians. So of course, there's gonna be the GPT is gonna create huge impacts on the team structures, and even for you as a mid-senior level, and how do you change the way of how you manage the team, and what do you think of what you can see the change of the team?
I'll start that off by saying, I think some of the challenges about not having training for younger generations started before all this. I think the COVID lockdowns, I think, really hurt the ability to teach the younger generation of workers in most companies, because we no longer had proximity, no longer had the ability to sort of mentor, the ability to like work side by side on projects, and doing things like you described, going to the print shop and picking up the plates, or all the other sort of like menial tasks that you were often given as a junior employee, are super educational, right? And it's like, you know, just like schooling, you learn to write the alphabet before you start writing in States, and we've lost that. I instruct all my teams, and we just had a call about it today, in fact, where I'm encouraging them all to get as deeply involved in AI, using AI tools as they can, and want them to become the masters of this technology and not the victims of it. So, and since most of the opportunity, I think, is on the more junior levels, because that's not the work that's yet easily replaced, you know, that's the most easily replaceable work. I want everybody in my team, I say, you figure out Microsoft's Copilot in Excel, learn how to get that to make pivot tables and do all the kinds of things that you might have had to have done manually. You know, there's research tools, we'll have handouts, there's a whole bunch of things that I'm asking people to do. But I'd like to hear from everybody else on the panel, how they're using or thinking about AI in their teams.
There's two things that come to mind. One is exactly what Peter said. There's a Moneyball moment in a lot of companies right now where too many people aren't using these tools day to day. Threaten, they don't want to, they're used to the way whatever it is. So I've tasked my team to disrupt that for our organization as much as possible. We've set up generative AI coffee hours once every other week, the idea being information sharing. But for me, I tend to use three tools usually, which is Perplexity, which is AI-enabled search, slide.ai, which is a Google Slide plugin to help make slide building easier, and then Hemingway to make sure I'm not writing incoherently. And so I basically said, like, find that for you and figure that out. So for one thing, it's just use these tools, because if you do, you'll be better than everybody else. We can try that. The other way, though, is that we use a tool called Gong, which records internal and external meetings and makes it really easy to search through for keywords, for key themes. And it makes it easier for me to coach my team, because I don't have to listen to every call one-on-one. I have to sit in on every meeting. I can use a larger data set to say, okay, cool, you're using too many cover words, you're interrupting too often. These are things that I do. So that's where we're kind of just going ground up. But again, it's that Moneyball moment. The second everybody just starts doing it, that advantage is lost. So I'm trying to make sure we do it first.
We have a lot of data privacy concerns in our business.
Okay.
So we do have AI tools. We're in the process of building our own homegrown systems, because we want to keep our data private, because we deal with a lot of very sensitive information. But I do use Perplexity because we need to like think about the market, and it's the best, I think, for research.
Yeah.
But how does it affect how I manage? I think I expect more, actually, because if someone comes with mediocre writing, it's like there's kind of no excuse to just put it in AI and at least have like a good jumping off point. So if anything, it actually like has raised my bar.
Because everybody's got the infinite interns now.
Yeah.
we're not allowed to upload our data either to these platforms. My way around is like I'll add a 5 to all the numbers and like upload that. That's not my real number. I'm not sure if that's a loophole or not, but yeah. So like, our ability to use that is somewhat limited, but we do use technology like Sprinkler without the vowel E at the end. So, and that's a social listening tool where for a company like BBC Studios, you have so many people talking about the BBC. And you want to be able to parse it out to what you want to reply to versus not, and how do you escalate to some other places. So it uses like sentiment analysis to say this is a positive remark, negative remark, this is like a really bad complaint, and it can start pushing these messages to other people to this person needs a response, right? Versus automate something, right? So that's where you give that tool to somebody like if you're a junior person, they're managing that tool for you, thinking about the rules, and they're the ones running.
Yeah, you know, sentiment analysis was another big e-commerce play that we had done. People comment on products, and you could have AI start to look for themes like, oh, people think this is overpriced. People don't like the quality of this thing. They want to get much faster on fixing this kind of issues.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody tried out Apple Vision Pro recently?
Nicole loves to talk about it.
No, I haven't. I'm curious.
Yeah, just talking about the neuromarketing part, because so far the information output from the consumer side, are mostly from either audio or tactile output, right? They either say something or they interact with the keyboard or the mouse or the touchscreen with their hands. But barely, I think it hasn't been implemented in marketing where that's the gaze of the consumer or the cerebral cortex activity of the consumer. Actually, the information from those sources are integrated into the marketing process. So far, I have learned that there are 3 major ways that have been implemented in marketing or the laboratory condition to study the consumer's response to the marketing products. So the first one is the ocular tracking of the gazes. And the second one is EEG, which is the monitor of the electrical activity in the surface areas of the brain. Although it has a shortcoming, which is that it fails to detect the activity deep inside the brain, but it's able to detect some very fast and fleeting activity. And the third one is even more intrusive, MRI, which gauge the neural activity in the canal of, especially in the spinal cord of the hindbrain, especially. And so far, I think the method that is closest to the actual business implementation is the ocular tracking. So I'm really, really curious. Anybody tried out this before?
That's fascinating. I haven't tried it, but now I kind of want to. It makes me wonder if Neuralink. It makes me wonder if the Apple Vision Pro is a thing that happens, but Neuralink is the ultimate like end goal of like in-brain computing versus something that's a filter.
You're really scaring me.
I mean, how long before?
We all talk about how AI could help us build like our companies and stuff and how we can use it as marketers. But I want to ask, what do you think of AI as a customer? Whereas like we don't need to be creative anymore when you just, I think you mentioned how Amazon created an AI system and it suggests products. So should marketers, we should try to implement to Rufus so that, it could recommend our products. Was an aspect.
Optimized for LLMs, you mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is sort of the new SEO, isn't it? Like optimizing our sites for Rufus and OpenAI to read it. There's actually an interesting use of that I just saw with one of the analyst firms optimize their reports for queries that people are doing so what we're seeing is people using ChatGPT and saying, who's the best cybersecurity company in the United States with this expertise in banking? And it's reading our site and it's reading these analyst reports. And I imagine commerce is going to be the same. People are going to say, like, what's the best blue sofa I can buy, blah, blah, blah. But in this particular case, they put the tool on the homepage of their site so people can use it as a sort of a way to synthesize all the information behind it. The AI gave the wrong information in this case. And said some company had the highest, was number 1. That company immediately put that on their website and started buying social media saying, according to Gartner, we're number one. And Gartner's like, no, it's a mistake in the LLM. They're like,
Wow.
that's on your site. But that is interesting. Like, has anybody here thought about how do you optimize your sites, your product SKUs, whatever for?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that, you know, for tech companies. Are you familiar with the idea of product market fit, that you have to have something that fits what people need? And often, any tech product has decisions it makes. It's going to be really good at doing this. It's going to be okay at that, and it's not going to do this at all. I think of the marketing part of it as I do product market fit in reverse. I figure out what the company has and where they compete. And then I try to focus the sales team on going after the people who are going to love it, and where they're weak, the company's weak, don't even approach those people because you're just going to fail. You're going to have a lot of cycles before the buyer realizes that you're not right. And you're much better off just getting all the places where you fit great. So there's a tool which I would encourage you to look at. I'm still playing with it, called Google Notebook. So you can take in any given category. Let's say you're looking at data clean rooms. You can download all the PDFs, you put it into Google Notebook, and then you can query the notebook. You can say, of all the data clean rooms in here, who has the best, who's the weakest here, who does Gartner rate the highest? And because it's all very confined data, those answers are going to be really good. So I'm using that in my practice to, if I'm researching people I want to pitch, I'll just go do that and let it, infinite interns, right? I'll let that do all the work. So I haven't quite gotten there yet, but I would encourage you to play with that. The other thing, just because somebody mentioned Meta, I would encourage you, if you're on Facebook, follow Jan LeCun from Meta. He's very active, and there's a couple of groups, but there are really good AI groups, surprisingly good on Facebook that are worth following, where LeCun will participate. So you can get really, really smart fast.
A question from a listener or watcher in Indonesia. I'm trying to think what time it must be there. What are some ways in which AI is transforming strategies or tactics that marketers use to find and reach customers? So I think this is really particularly interesting in an e-commerce context, like a lot of possible buyers for my product. How is AI being used to find a possible customer or reach a customer?
I mean, I think it is, if you look at what Meta, TikTok, the social platform they're doing, they're putting those ads, their product in front of the people right off the bat, right? So it's less the marketer building it themselves versus just trusting Meta to go find that person. Because they have enough first-party data on these individuals. You download the app, effectively you're the product, and they'll optimize to get the most amount of money.
Yeah, and then on the creative side, there's things like Pencil and Vista and a handful of others that are basically doing like DCO on steroids with no waste. It's just auto testing any conceivable variable within an nearly infinite number of creatives, because with Gen AI, you can create 360 ads in 5 seconds. To tweak and to say, okay, what's going to work best? Ultimately, that's going to have a huge impact on user acquisition and e-com and sales and conversion.
In today's day and age, differentiating your business has become more and more difficult. If you want to differentiate your business, have a human answer your customers' calls, to quote. Do you think we're about to face an AI fatigue? And I almost think of it, I would face it differently. Is this like an AI arms race? Who can produce the most content using AI the quickest? Or
I think the future is AI is fighting AIs. So like in a buyer-seller environment, I think we're a few years away from the buyer saying, here's my criteria, go out and talk to all the AIs from all these different technology companies and try to sort it out and then say, okay, finally, after like ping back and forth, maybe now we'll have a meeting. And I think that's actually will be really good because it will stop a lot of wasting time. One of the first questions I ask my tech clients when I go meet them is, what are your sales cycles like? How long does it take? And the worst possible answer they can give me is, we have 14 meetings and then we can't close the business. Because that's just awful. That's just killing everybody's time. It's much better off if they say, we have a meeting or two, I find a champion in there who wants to buy, and we're off to the races. So I think that's going to happen, because I also think, and I won't lecture on this, but I think the sales process is broken in all of this. If you're a buyer, you're endlessly pursued by people selling you things that you don't want and can't buy. And if you're a seller, you're trying to still reach these people, and you have your sales manager saying, call 5 more prospects today. So that's got to get fixed. And I actually am hopeful that AI will fix that.
so it's like an AI, it's like a trading desk.
Yeah.
For an exchange for buyers and sellers to meet in a virtual environment.
Yeah, and if you have a good enough AI buyer talking to a good enough AI seller, they can hash out a lot of that stuff and just say, you know, this doesn't work at all.
In the near term, it'll be a little darker than that. And the only reason I say this, I don't know how you guys all have your parents are all getting older. And my fear is that they get the AI call with my voice. And we've all heard about this, and you know, they panic and they transfer their life savings to somebody or something like that. There was a situation in Hong Kong where a guy transferred $25 million after a FaceTime, basically a Zoom call. There was an AI generated Zoom call with his CFO, and it wasn't a real guy. And he knows the CFO, he interacts with him, and it looks so real that he transferred $25 million into this account because he thought his CFO told him to. So I think a lot of people are going to be really, you know, have a lot of trepidation around AI as it starts to do this. And to your point as well, where, you know, I get so many spam calls now that are AI generated on my phone as well. So I think there's a lot of, you know, legislation that'll have to happen. And then you think about the deep fakes and the way that's been misused lately, that's going to be a legislative problem as well. So I think there'll be a lot of pushback in the near term on AI and its use case and how are we policing it.
So just to conclude the panel, I think we're all sitting, I think that at the precipice of really interesting times, some dark stuff, but some really, really wonderful things. And I think in a way, it's like every other technical innovation that we've seen before in our careers. It's like, if you stay curious and you experiment and you learn and you test, we could find ways to use these technologies to enhance marketing, the ability to find consumers, the ability to transact with people and get them the right products, and hopefully do it more efficiently over time. Thank you all for coming. Keep looking for stuff from either the AMA or NYU. Again, thank you, Channel, for partnering with us on this. Thank you.
Yes, yes.